Hello, and welcome to our video audio podcast, Couched in Color. I'm your mental health expert, teen and young adult crusader, and psychological scientist, Dr. Alfiee. This podcast reflects my life's work, helping our young people and young at heart identify mental health challenges, disrupt negative patterns, and discover the best versions of themselves. I'm so happy that you've joined us. For over 20 years, I want you to know that I've had my finger on the pulse of BIPOC teen mental health. I recognize that historically and currently, with these dual pandemics of COVID and racial injustice raging, our young people are suffering, sometimes they're struggling, and always the care that they need is quite scarce. So each week, I'm joined by young people, mental health experts, celebrities, and influencers to help us uncover the secrets to healing the hearts and minds of our BIPOC teens, their families, and their communities. Here at Couched in Color, we believe deeply in spreading love and light, bolstered by culturally relevant science. So let's dive in. Welcome, everyone. I can't even tell you how excited I am for my guest today. My guest is someone I've been admiring from afar for quite a while on social media. And we connected through this amazing organization. All y'all know it, the Born This Way Foundation. Maya is I think she's the ED executive director. And of course, you know, it was founded by the one and only and her mama, Lady Gaga, and right, Mama Germ, I think is what they call her. And so it's my pleasure to have my guest here today. My guest's name is Juan Acosta. And Juan and I are going to have, a free form conversation. And I really just want you all to meet this amazing human being. And if you don't mind, Juan, please introduce yourself to everyone and we can dive in.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Juan Acosta. My pronouns are he, him. I am a mental health advocate, and I particularly focus on the intersections of mental health as it pertains to the LGBTQ plus community and the Latinx community. I've served on numerous committees, and I'm one of the co-authors in Lady Gaga's and Born This Way Foundation's new book, Channel Kindness.
Awesome. All right. So as we're having this conversation, you mentioned a bunch of things that are super important to me. One is this intersection of the LGBTQ plus community and being Latinx. And I feel like there's so many layers, right? Because if you're Latinx, you can be of any race, right? But what you're also talking about is the multiple identities that people have when they come from the Latinx community. So can you talk a little bit about what's unique about that, why that's important, what the meaning is around being a mental health advocate with these overlays and this intersectionality of being Latinx and a member of the LGBTQ community? What do those things mean for you? How do they show up in your work and your advocacy?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Mental health for many years has really focused on just one size fits all, which hasn't worked for many people, in particular many underserved communities. And growing up, I witnessed that in my own life, not knowing what terms were for mental health. I didn't even know what mental health was. And it's because the stigma within the Latinx community. I particularly come from a Mexican family. I immigrated here at the age of 2. My parents brought me here, but I immigrated here at the age of 2. So for many people of color, from many underserved communities, they struggle with this and they don't know where to go. And when they do get resources, they might not fit their needs because people might not understand the complexity of these topics, right? There's so much more to one person's identity than just one thing. We all have different layers to ourselves that we need to address. And I feel like that's something that needs to be addressed within the mental health system. And my own struggles were really the catalyst for my mental health advocacy, in which I didn't want any other kids who might have been living through a similar situation like myself to have to undergo the trauma, the different struggles I underwent. So it's been my mission since 13. I started my community work at the age of 13 to really focus on that and to try and help contribute to a community that's really in need of these resources.
Oh, there's so many things about what you said that are so meaningful to me. Just because, one, the most important is you said you started when you were 13. Like, to be a 13-year-old and to be, a person who
immigrated from another place, you know, with your family. And, you know, I would love for us to talk a little bit about how mental health is viewed in traditional Mexican families, like Mexican American families, and in the Latinx community, you know, on the whole, knowing it is super, super, super diverse, right? Like I'm really clear. There's a difference between Central and South American, Caribbean, Latinx folks, right? I know, I get it. At least I hope I get it. And so I wonder for you being Mexican American and being at the age of 13, what, if you don't mind sharing with us, what happens to a 13-year-old, right, around this issue of mental health that makes that 13-year-old say, you know what, I don't want other kids to go through this. You know, I need to do something. How does that activism get turned on in 13-year-old kid? Because that's a baby.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, just being an immigrant in this country is really difficult as it is, right? But the stigma within Mexican traditional families in these conversations is really, really high, and it's something that hasn't gone away. And it won't go away unless we have the resources, unless we have these conversations that are proactive in these communities. For me, I really was able to see machismo culture, especially in the Mexican families, is something that really runs deep and it really impacts it. And when people talk about their mental health, they're written off. They're like, you'll get over it, or just get out of bed, don't be lazy, or do this, do that. And they're not really validated for what they're like trying to communicate to the people, whether it's parents or other family members. In my particular case, I was really struggling at a young age getting bullied in elementary school. I was being labeled things like, you're gay and all of that before I was able to admit it to myself, which felt really intrusive. And
Yes.
It obviously didn't feel good. It doesn't
Yes.
ever feel good to get bullied, but to be labeled things before you're really able to come to that conclusion yourself and to own it yourself is really damaging for a young child from anywhere. And I just didn't feel good. I didn't like going to school. I always had stomach aches and this and that. I didn't want to be in school. And at 13 is when I really struggled with my depression, my anxiety. But the thing is that I didn't know these terms. So I just knew I just didn't feel good. And my immediate instinct was to not tell my parents because they were working full time to put food on the table because we immigrated to this country. And if you know the struggle, people have to work 2 jobs at times. It's not an easy task to do. And I didn't want to be a task for my parents. And I know children should never feel that way. My parents never directly made me feel that way, but it was my own intuition, my own perspective of what they were already working their butts off to really make sure that we were okay. So I didn't want to be another one of their concerns.
Juan, that makes my heart hurt because I can feel just listening to you describe it. You know, my family, I don't come from a family of immigrants, but my family is of color, right? Obviously. And I feel like there's some universality to this idea, not to minimize it or not to say that it's not your unique experience. I do feel like there's some universality to being a kid of color and knowing how hard your parents are working, right? And I think that there's an additional layer for families who've immigrated because it's really about we came here for things to be better, right? And so we made these sacrifices. We left everybody we love, you know, we left everything we know to come to this new place and to give our kids opportunities. And I think there's some variant of that for all immigrant families. And so to be of color in the United States, excuse me, and to have immigrated, that's, you know, kids carry that with them, whether the parents are saying it or not. Right now, I know in Black communities, sometimes parents will say stuff like, well, I brought you in this world, now take you out. You know what I mean? Or, you know, all the sacrifices we made for you to have a roof over your head and food on the table, you know, you better not act like you don't appreciate this. And so I think they're just, even if they don't say things like that, like you said, to your point, there's this weight that you carry with you. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot. And so it's just so heartbreaking to hear you talk about as a child going to school. And I never framed it like that. And I really want people to hear it. People are seeing things and they're making assumptions. And maybe their assumptions are right, but it's not their place to put that on you, number one. And it's definitely not their place to say it in a negative way. right? So if you're going to say these things, I think we have to understand as a community at large, that's just not our place. And we should keep our mouths shut. If we have questions, keep your questions to yourself. So I'm just, I'm thinking about how difficult that must have been for a young child to go to school and to have to deal with this stuff. And then to carry the burden of, but I don't want to be a task. It's so well stated, and it makes me so sad. And I think it's because it's so well stated. That's what you feel like as a kid. I am becoming another chore, another task for these people who are busting their butts, just trying to work so hard. And so for you, I would love to hear a little bit about and educate some of our parents out here and teenagers. Is there something we should know about how to help a child when the child is being bullied and it's coming up with things like stomach aches and back aches? They've been traumatized, right? So everything hurts. I don't feel good because they're trying to avoid going into that situation where they're being terrorized. Do you have words of advice or encouragement for parents and kids when they find themselves in that kind of situation? What can they do? What should they do?
I think really having intentional conversations, right? I think oftentimes children see their parents, but they have passive conversations. Oh, how are you? How was school? Good, bye. But if you're not fostering that environment that is a safe space for your child to have, that confidence in you to describe some of the things that they're going through in school, then you're never going to know what's really happening. And I know you mentioned earlier, like little comments that maybe family members make that they might not be aware how much it impacts a child along the line, but it really does. So as parents, I think there's a responsibility to really make sure that what we're saying is not hurtful, because you never really know, especially with conversations around LGBTQ plus identities and more, what a child is really going through or where their process is at in terms of finding themselves or who they are. And I grew up with a lot of cousins who made a lot of homophobic comments, and this was before they even knew I belonged to the community. So every time I heard something, I was like, "Oh shit! My family is not gonna like me if I'm this way, right?" And those were things that were like constant things that ran through my head. But I think obviously making sure that what we're saying is respectful of all identities, because I think that's what we should be prioritizing. The respect for everybody and making sure that we're passing that on to our children, or even as young adults, if we see that we have the opportunity to contribute to the community, to be of support to everybody, no matter what spectrum, whether it's race, sexual orientation, and more, if we have that capacity, then we should do it, because we might have siblings who might be looking up to us for an example. And if we're able to be a positive example, then it's our responsibility to do so.
Oh, I just want to cry. That's just beautiful. Like, in all seriousness, because I love this, and because we follow each other on social media, this idea that there's a space for everybody, whoever you are, that is like just so deeply meaningful to me. And that the way you show up in the world, born this way, right? The way you show up in the world is not only okay, but it is to be celebrated, right? So I come back to this thing. If you don't have anything nice to say, keep your mouth shut, right? But if you can be encouraging to somebody, sometimes just like you, Juan, you're encouraging to people just by being yourself, just by showing up and looking the way that you look, just by showing up and speaking the way that you speak. Like you said, there are people who are looking at you who may be questioning, right? Or who may be looking for, I have a really good friend, David Rivera, Dr. David Rivera, who talks about looking for their mirror. You might be a mirror for somebody. And so when they hear you speak, when they hear you talk about your experience, they're like, oh, okay, wait, my family's Mexican or my family's Latinx. I belong to the LGBTQ plus community. I may not be out yet, but look at this person out here who is like just loving themselves and appreciating who they are and speaking out about things that are important, like mental health. I think it's wonderful. And the takeaway for me, one of the takeaways is intentional conversations. I want all my parents, guardians, people who are helping to rear young people to understand intentional conversations. And I feel like, maybe you tell me what you think about this, those intentional conversations have to transfer to and translate to peers. So would you say that young people and young adults need to be having intentional conversations and what does that look like among young people? How do you have intentional conversations about mental health?
I definitely do think that these conversations for young adults and teens need to happen, right? Everybody has mental health, especially at such a young age. We've seen that throughout the mental health system. Many people don't get support until they're in a crisis, and that's not okay. People need the preventative resources, measures, all of that. And step one is by making sure that we're giving children and young adults the tools that they need to foster these proactive conversations. Knowing how to support one another in difficult times is crucial. And, we live in the age of social media where people put like their best snapshots, right? But we really don't know what's behind any of those social media accounts. We don't know what people are going through. And especially now where we're all at home for the most part, where children are so isolated and young adults as well, they're not able to foster that community that they had in schools. And when we talk about just the school system as a whole, there's a responsibility for every single young adult in school to know how to have these conversations, to support one another, because they spend the majority of their days in the classroom. And they might not even see their parents as much as they see their teachers and their peers in the school setting. So yes, I do think this is crucial for everybody to know how to support one another through these conversations.
Yeah, I love also what you said about the intentional conversation. We have to give people tools basically to have intentional conversations. And we have to let young people know. I really believe in this thing of teaching young people signs and symptoms, but not just that. What you said hit the nail on the head. Having conversations and knowing how to support other people in your life, right? Because I know when we're teens, like we've all been through it, right? If you've gone through the teenage years, there is this period of time where everything is like this, like me, right? But at the same time, your peers are the most important part of your life when you're a teenager, I think, and somewhat when you're a young adult. And so understanding that there's a responsibility that we have to not only see about ourselves, but to see about others in a way that's healthy, in a way that's productive, in a way that is supportive. I always have this thing I say about everybody, every single person I believe wants to be seen. You've probably seen me say it on social media, seen, valued, and heard. But sometimes we have to teach people, older folks too, how to see people, how to value them, and how to hear them, and which makes me think about this wonderful opportunity that you had. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit with us about your experience with Channel Kindness and all the amazing things that came out of that. Because I think what people get out of that, part of what they're getting out of that, I've read through the book and looked in it, and I have it right here on my little mantle here. And I know that you're in it. And so can you just talk to us a little bit about the whole Channel Kindness project? And maybe if you care to tell us a little bit, how did you get involved? Why was it something that you wanted to be involved with? And then, you got to shout out, because I got to hear it, all the big things that have happened, through your relationship with this book and sharing your story.
Yeah. Well, again, that's been such a great experience. But you said something so important right before that, and it was that we need to teach people how to have a conversation and hear one another. And I think that's what's been lacking in our society for so long. People are not having conversations, but they're talking at one another. And I think by giving people the tools that they need to speak and have a proactive and productive conversation, that's where we're able to change and shift everything in the society. Yeah. So I 100% agree with that. In terms of Channel Kindness, well, I started as a Channel Kindness reporter in 2017. I was one of the inaugural reporters when it first launched, and I've always been a huge fan of Lady Gaga and Cynthia Germanata, just ever since they launched the foundation. I love Gaga and the music and the performance, but I received a gift from her, and it was her Born This Way album. And when I was in middle school, when I was at my lowest, and that made me feel like I'm hearing this, and it's probably the first time I hear it on the radio anywhere. And it was that visibility that it was okay for me to be me. And it really pushed me to feel like I wanted to be here in this world. And it reminded me like I have so much to contribute. I have my own perspective, my own identity, my own uniqueness to really show up and help change, or at least strive to change something in this world. And when I had the opportunity to be one of the reporters, I obviously immediately said yes. But Channel Kindness is really about sharing kind stories in community. Oftentimes in the news, we are really just thrown with a lot of negative news, and it's needed, right? We need to be aware of these things, but we also need to be reminded of that people are doing kind acts, that people are doing kind things. And a lot of times, a lot of these positive stories blur out in the environment because we are so concerned and preoccupied with a lot of negativity, whether it's in our lives or whether it's in the news. But Channel Kindness was a breath of fresh air for me, and it gave me the tools to really be confident in my story and being able to share it. And yeah, I was able to be one of the co-authors in Channel Kindness, and that story and that book that I wrote with them is really meaningful to me because it really described my journey in drafting a historic LGBTQ plus proclamation for my hometown of Woodland, California, where I was getting bullied in middle school because of my identity. But I changed that and I shifted that, and I was able to draft a proclamation that passed through the city council for the first time ever and made history, proclaiming June as LGBTQ plus Pride Month and being the first message and acknowledgement to the LGBTQ plus community from the city council and its local advisors.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's like a full circle moment, right? It's like you start in one place and people are being horrible and awful. And to be in your hometown, to be a leader, right? Like you said, you took it and you flipped it. And I really want to drive home this point about somebody making you feel seen. I see why people love Lady Gaga so much. Somebody putting out an album. She didn't necessarily know you, or maybe was thinking of you or many other young people when she was writing it, but she knew it was important, right? You didn't necessarily know that drafting this proclamation was going to have such a huge impact in your community, but you wanted to do something. And I just think about sometimes there are these acts that we engage in that even if we don't realize how selfless they are in the moment, they really are selfless, right? Because you gave a whole community of young people in your hometown something that was given to you by Lady Gaga. So there's some kid out there right now who's like, yeah, it's June, it's LGBTQ Pride Month where I'm from. And, they're thinking of Juan Acosta and they're thinking, well, he did it, so maybe I can do it, right? Maybe I can be out and be proud of who I am. Maybe I can be okay with, maybe I've had some mental health struggles in the past and I'm working through them, and that's okay, right? Maybe I can just be whoever I am. If I'm non-gender conforming, right? If I'm gay or lesbian, if I'm questioning, if I'm trans, all of that is okay. And all of that is to be celebrated. And I think it's really important for young people to hear, and adults to hear your story, because I want them to hear how painful it was for you to go through that as a young child, and how you got something from somebody that allowed you to take it, pick up the mantle, and go move the whole conversation forward and be proud of who you are, be comfortable with who you are, and also be vocal on behalf of other people. So those kids who were transphobic, homophobic, right, just bullying and mean and nasty in their behavior, I always tell young people, that's not about who you are. That's about who they are. That's about what they've been taught, right? And so you don't own that. But what you did was you own the piece of it that you could control, which is I can be proud of who I am and I can advocate for other people. So this idea of the story that you put into the book, this idea of the proclamation that you got passed, that you fought for and drafted, that just makes me so happy. And it also makes me think a little bit about the public facing side of who you are and what you do. And I wonder if there's I don't want to say any downsides, but does it ever feel like does it ever feel like pressure, right? Being who you are, being out front, being public, talking about mental health, being an advocate. Because when you're an activist, I think sometimes what we don't talk about is how it can be heavy, right, to be an activist. And I'm wondering, if not, that's fine, but I'm just wondering, is it ever a challenge for you being an activist and carrying that pressure with you?
Yeah, every day. I feel like for me in particular is a challenge. not necessarily in terms of like really like, you know, emotional challenges every day, but I always wonder like, am I doing enough for the community, or what could I be doing, right? How else can I contribute, especially within this past year where I know that so many people have been struggling because of the pandemic, but also because of the topic of equity in this country. And I wonder like, what more can I do? And I was 21 at the time when I drafted that proclamation. I'm 23 now, but that was scary within itself, just being, I had to speak for the public comment session, and I had never known any of proclamation language. I stayed up all night to draft it because they said they would put it on the agenda if I had a draft, which I didn't, but I was not going to let that be a barrier. So I stayed up. I was like, I need to get this done. And I did my research. I did it. I presented it. But in the public comment session, I had to be vulnerable in front of the community. And it's never easy, especially when there was like opposing views, people speaking out against it and all of that, which it's difficult and it's scary, right? Especially as a 21-year-old, my voice was shaky, but I was really, it wasn't about me, how you were saying. This was before I moved out to San Francisco to pursue my higher education, but I didn't want any other child, young adult, whoever it was growing up in this town to have to go through that. And the only thing that I was thinking through that moment was like, this is so much pressure. There's news outlets outside, there's people opposing it in here, but this isn't about me. So I have to find and really like harness that bravery and that light within me, wherever it was in that moment, and really just show up and show out as much as I can to make sure this gets done. And thankfully it did. But on the day to day, that's my biggest struggle, and the pressure that I feel is, how can I contribute more?
Yeah. And
how can I make sure that I'm helping everyone who needs help? And sometimes I need to bring myself back in and be like, I can only do so much, right? I'm not a superhuman. I am not anything. I am a human with good intentions who is trying to build a bigger sense of community and trying to really uplift voices, just how my voice was uplifted. And I think that's my biggest reminder and what brings me back in.
Oh, I love it. I love that you have something that grounds you. And it also makes me think, what kinds of things do you do? Somebody asked me this and I had to stop and think for a second, not too long, but I had to stop and think because nobody asked me that. One, they asked me, how am I doing under COVID? And I was like, oh, I have to think about that. But what the other question that they asked, I've gotten better at answering quickly, is how do you take care of yourself? So what kinds of things do you do that help you take care of your mental health and take care of yourself, especially under these wild times that we're living in?
Yeah, well, thankfully, I've been at my family's, so I've just been able to spend time with them, and that's been really good for me.
Good.
I started working out again a couple months ago, and that's really, really helped me. Just my energy, I feel less anxious about things and all of that. And I've just been really practicing meditation and just grounding myself as much as I can, which has really, really helped. There's this mantra that I think to myself all the time, and it's, I am more than one moment. And for me, that means I am more than one moment of success, and I am more than one moment of me feeling unwell or feeling like I failed at something. So I am more than the success, and I am more than any failure that I could ever undergo, because there's so much more to it. There's no one polar opposite or the other, but I am a human, and there's so much more to my humanity than either of those two things. And that's something that I carry with me every day, and I remind myself.
Wow. Oh, can you say the mantra one more time? I'm going to remember that.
Yeah, so it's, I am more than one moment. That's what I think.
Beautiful. I am more than one moment. That's powerful. I have this thing that I do on my IGTV every week that I do a set of mantras. It's always 3. And just listening to that, now I'm like, maybe I just need to cut it down to 1. And maybe I need to get you to come record one for me, and I'll stick it on my IGTV, because that's really powerful. Everything that you said is everything that I love. Exercising, and what I say to people is, I'm anxious too. And so why I exercise is to help me manage the anxiety. It's really less about how I look physically. It took me a while to figure that out because, like, think about it. I don't know if you have dealt with this, but with me, I would get anxious about the exercising if I didn't see the kind of results that I wanted to see. Right. So then I had to like, no, that's not why we're doing this. I had to really let that go. And to your point about I am more than one moment, right? The moment of getting on the scale or standing in front of the mirror or trying to put on that, you know, we all got that one pair of jeans. Like, if I can get in these jeans, I'm good. Or I can get in these pair of pants, I'm good, right? Get in my, like, I don't know, my test pants or whatever. And learning that the exercise for me was far more about, I just wanted to feel better. I wanted to get that anxiety off of me. So it helps it dissipate. And you know, I love what you said about meditation because that's my jam. I've been practicing for 20 years. I absolutely love it. It is, if it doesn't happen in the morning, I feel like the rest of my day is kind of messed up. So thank you so much for sharing and being so open about what you do to take care of yourself, especially being as young as you are, because I think what it teaches people is it's never too early to start thinking about your mental health and taking care of it. And I'm gonna go back to something else you said, learning how to have intentional conversations. You're never too young to begin to practice that. So as we think about winding down a little bit, I do want to ask, can you talk to us about the big opportunity you had with Channel Kindness to be featured like in a national, like, was it an ad campaign? Tell us about that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I'm one of the co-authors in the book for Channel Kindness, and I did a couple events for the book with the foundation, but there was also this commercial being played at Target all throughout the nation, and it was super cool. I began getting texts from friends like, hey, I just saw you at Target. And I was like, no, I'm sitting at home. What are you talking about? And then they're like, no, on the screen. I was like, wait, what? And then I saw it and I was like, oh, what? How did this happen? And I texted Aisha, one of my friends from the foundation, and she's like, oh yeah, I didn't know like this was already out, like this and that. But it was such a cool moment, and it's really been full circle. Just for my family, as I said, we immigrated here, and I'm a first generation college student, first generation professional. And to now like be in this book with the foundation, Lady Gaga, and to be in Target, I recently was able to speak for the United Nations, and I just got promoted this week for regional manager for a statewide peer run warm line, the Cal Hope warm line in California. So like, these are all like first times in my family where I don't even think about just being me, but like we are able to do these things, right? Because it's always about those who paved the way. And if it wasn't for them leaving everything behind to offer me these opportunities, I wouldn't be doing any of this today. I would be helping the community for sure in some capacity, but I wouldn't be doing as much as I'm doing right now. And yeah, my life has really, really changed. And I think the catalyst for that was really when I was able to own my identity and put on some big sunglasses, a bright leather jacket, and walk down the street in it, that I was able to be like, okay, this is who I am. I feel comfortable. And now I'm going to go after what I set myself out to do, regardless of those who will oppose it, regardless of those who like it or not, because this is my truth. And when you own your truth, that's what will propel you to those heights.
Woo, drop the mic. Enough said. Like, I'm not even gonna try to touch that. Beautifully said. That is, oh my God. Like, I'm not even gonna try to repeat that. That was just beautifully stated. And you know, for people who are listening and watching, if you're listening, I'm gonna need you to like rewind this and go back to just that last minute and a half and listen to Juan tell you, you gotta own your truth, right? And your truth is gonna move you forward. Oh, I love it. It's beautifully stated. And congratulations on being in Target. That's hilarious that your friends were like, yeah, I see you. Like, no, I'm not in Target. I'm at home. That cracks me up. Yeah. I thought that was adorable.
That was my reaction. I was like, what are you talking about?
Oh, I love it. So yeah, you're right. So this full circle moment of, I do love that. I love as a young person that one of the things you're saying is I'm honoring the people who made sacrifices for me. Because I think sometimes all of us forget that were it not for what they did, we wouldn't have the opportunities to be doing exactly what we're doing in the moment. Maybe we would be doing something different or similar or aligned, right? Like mission and vision aligned for us, but it wouldn't be this thing. So I know your family is so proud. I'm certainly proud. I know that people who are close to you and even people from afar are really proud of this work that you're doing because you are showing up as your authentic self. And to me, just nothing more important than that. And there's so many young people out here who don't have the opportunity to show up as their authentic selves. And like you said earlier, from the Born This Way album from Lady Gaga, and then from you drafting the proclamation and getting it passed, and even as a 21-year-old, you know, if I was your mom, I'd have been ready to fight somebody. Because, you know, if anybody came and said something negative about something my baby had done, I'd be like, not today, you gonna catch these hands. So, you know, the fact that you were able to withstand that and get that pass, right? And be brave and be bold and just be you and do something to fight for other people, I think it's wonderful. So I just want to thank you so much again for giving me some of your time to come on the podcast. And I think what I wonder as we close is, are there any thoughts that you have or any words of wisdom? You said some of them, but any words of wisdom for young people who are, you know, maybe struggling with having an intersectional identity, and who, as a result of that, may be dealing with some mental health concerns? Do you have any final things that you would want to say to them? I'll ask that first. And then I'm going to ask you to tell everybody where they can follow you and find you and plug the book so they know that you're in the book. So those two things, what words of encouragement, and then where can people follow you and just like learn about all the cool things that you're doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me here and for building this space for people, because it's really, really important. And I genuinely mean it when I say I really do admire your work, and that you're a huge, huge advocate, and you really show that visibility and representation for many, many people. So I really do appreciate you. In terms of words of encouragement, I'd say really lean on your peers, right? We all have a story, we all struggle, but also feel free and do reach out to resources wherever you are. If you don't know how to find them, I think it's really important to take someone up to your head and really let them know what you're feeling and what you're going through. I think when we're able to be transparent and really assert those boundaries for ourselves and reach out for support, that is what will change your life. And it's not easy. I know that many people might not have that support system at home or people to trust, but you are not alone. And I don't want to be one of those ad campaigns that says that, but I really do think that there's resources, wonderful ones that you can find online. And I really want to echo that. You are not alone in going through this. I thought I was alone at some point myself. And I heard a song and it reminded me that I wasn't, that there was other people who might have been going through similar things like I was. But if you don't need to hear a song, you can hear it from me right now. You are not alone, and I want you to stay here, and I want you to reach out for support wherever you can and for whoever you can.
That is so thoughtful and so beautiful. So the last thing I'll ask, I just really appreciate that, everything that you shared. The last thing I'll ask is, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you and about the organization that you work for? Because it sounds like it's really important. Like a warm line, like what is that? Tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us where people can learn more about you and your work.
Yeah, so the Warm Line, I'm currently one of the regional managers for the Warm Line with the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. It's a statewide peer-run warm line, and it's basically a line where people are able to call in to get support from others who might have similar experiences with them. And it's a non-crisis line. So whatever you're doing, if you're feeling a little bit down or alone, because we've been in this isolated space for over a year now, I believe. If you just need someone to talk to, I encourage you to call a warm line. There's many, many throughout the nation. And I think that really helps bridge the gap when sometimes, people sometimes have really traumatic experiences in clinical settings due to numerous reasons, right? Gatekeeping, other stuff. So if you want something that's easily accessible, call Warm Line. But yeah, and my socials are at Juan Acosta with 2 underscores at the end on all platforms. And you can find my webpage at juanacostaoficial.com.
Yay! awesome. And don't forget to go look up Juan's contribution to Channel Kindness, the book by Lady Gaga. Was it Lady Gaga and her mom who put the whole book together? Okay.
Yeah, so the Born This Way Foundation and Lady Gaga.
Perfect. So the Born This Way Foundation and Lady Gaga with the book Channel Kindness. Make sure you go check that out. Juan has shared with us everywhere we can find him. And Juan, thank you again for just being a delightful human being, being a light, like being a beacon for other young people, and just for being yourself. I am so grateful that you came on the podcast, and I only wish you continued success.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and thank you for all you do. Genuinely, thank you.
So there you have it. That's a wrap for another episode of Couched in Color. We want you to know that we deeply value you, all of our viewers and our listeners, and everyone out there working to support optimal mental health, both for themselves and for our young people. And one of the best ways you can help our movement is by leaving us a 5-star review on our YouTube channel and everywhere you enjoy your audio podcasts, and by sharing our podcast with a friend. Please also tag us while you're out there listening and watching. Finally, head on over to dralfiee.com for more information about me, www.acomaproject.org for information about my nonprofit, and those are the places you can go to learn more about how you can help. So I'll see you next week. And until then, I'm going to say what I always say, which is that I'm wishing you lots of love, lots of light, and that I'm hoping it is always, always informed by good, culturally relevant science. Take care.